You are now tuned into Flipping the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds.
He's into the end zone. Touchdown, Eagles.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds. I'm Brian Cameron alongside Zach Chavalella and our special guest, OJ Spivey. How we feeling, guys?
Feeling great. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, happy to have you, OJ, and I'm happy to talk about some linebackers finally. I can't believe it's taken this long for us to get here, but the day is finally here, so I'm excited.
And there's another thing that took us a long time to get to. This is the first time that on Flipping the Birds, the bald men are winning the podcast. It's usually, every single guest has hair, every co-host has hair. I'm always, the lone one. But OJ came through in the clutch. It's making me look good tonight, so the ratio is on.
Once again, you forget to think about me. Every single week, I'm on with nothing but beards, and I got nothing, and I still got nothing. When's my time? When's my time, Brian?
Well, if there's any solid, Zach, I can't grow a full beard, so this is all it right here. So
I'll take it. I count you amongst my people, OJ. Thank you.
So a little bit of both of you guys, I guess.
OJ's the mix.
I don't know what that means, but a little bit of both of you guys.
OJ's the hybrid of Flipping the Birds today.
There you go.
Shout out to Eric and Morgan. Both are out today. Eric, I believe, is covering Flyers. Morgan has a little bit of personal thing going on. But we're here to talk about the Eagles, right? I mean, first thing we kind of cover is Eagles just coming off the recent contract extension for Devontae Smith. Big move, 3 years, $75 million. They also picked up his fifth-year option. Wide receiver 1B is no longer in question now. I mean, they have the offense solidified for the next several years. How are we feeling about that, OJ?
Well, it was a foregone conclusion, and I know a lot of fans, whether social media or whether out in the street, everybody's like, okay, when are you going to get Devontae Smith done? They got Landon Dickerson done. They got a couple guys done before, of course, Jalen Hurts last year. And they was like, okay, when are you going to get it done? When are you going to get it done? And I guess everybody was afraid that, another wide receiver would set the market. But, the Eagles have done what they've always done. I think you can go back to traditionally, going back years with Lane Johnson, even before that. They like to set the market before the market is even set. So that's been a long time policy, what they do with their draftees. If they like them enough, they perform enough, they keep them here, and they re-sign them before they either get to their fourth year, get through their third or fourth year or through their options. So it was just a foregone conclusion. The money makes sense. He's being paid amongst the top wide receivers, of course, guys later, during his draft class or maybe a year, before or after when they're eligible as well. The Justin Jeffersons of the world, I believe, they're going to get more money. But, from an Eagle standpoint, it works out because it's not going to cost you a ton down the line, and you keep them from getting a free agency, which I didn't think that was going to happen at all.
Yeah, and I think you really kind of hit on the key there is, wanting to reward these guys early, and that kind of works twofold. Obviously, that helps build this great reputation that the team has amongst its players, as one that really takes care of its guys. You can see that, with a whole lot of different things, whether they're signing guys early or, even just looking at Brandon Graham, and I don't want to make it sound like he's not also producing on the field or behind the scenes, because of course he is, but they want him around because of who he is and not just the player that he is as well. So this is really a franchise that cares about its guys in addition to trying to field the best team, and they really understand how to kind of marry those two philosophies in the best way for the team's interest. And you talked about some of those other guys who are going to hit those other paydays, and
Right.
For Philadelphia, you look at guys like CeeDee Lamb still not paid, Justin Jefferson still not paid. Whomever pays them, in CD's case, we're not even sure if it's going to be Dallas, but whomever pays them, like, they're going to get probably more money than Devonta, but Devonta Smith has that security. That's what works in his favor. That's why Landon Dickerson did this. That's why Jordan Mailata did this.
Right.
And on top of that, like, it's not as though they tried to cheap out these players on these deals either. There's a fair amount of guaranteed money being put forward, and
That's important.
just really a lot of good faith in these negotiations.
And it's become known as the Philadelphia way. And I think what's more unique about it is you have your 1A and 1B locked up. I mean, there was a good small chunk of Eagles fans and analysts alike that felt like A.J. Brown would kind of turn into a little bit of a TO because of the payday for Devontae, but Devontae kind of squashed that, saying that they're both on the same page with everything. And I feel like that's such a unique perspective because you have tandems like Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, who is going to be one or the other that's going to get paid. It's not going to be both of them over there in Cincinnati. And then CeeDee Lamb, you don't even know if he's going to get paid by Dallas. But Philadelphia has done a unique thing of just always getting ahead of the curve and paying their guys, making sure that the guys don't touch free agency. They did it with AJ. They're doing it with Devontae, Landon Dickerson. Curious to see who's next or what's next for Philadelphia, which kind of leads us into our next topic. Rounding off the mock drafts of the last several weeks, we're going to cover a linebacker in the first half of the show, wide receiver in the second half. I know linebacker, it's always a topic of debate in Philadelphia, from even after drafting Nakobe Dean. It's been such a sore spot in the defense, such a weakness. Dean has been, missed a lot of time because of injury. We did have great play by Zach Cunningham last year, even though he missed a little bit of time, but it's just a huge rotating door. Philadelphia, they're going into the draft looking for guys who can make impact long term and possibly guys who can make an impact now. What players do you guys feel like can make an impact now if Philly were to look in the first 2 rounds to draft a linebacker?
Well, I mean, it's a good set of linebackers coming out in the draft, but of course, if you're an Eagles fan, everybody's going to look at Jeremiah Trotter Jr. You have the legacy there, and one of the funniest things about being a lifelong Philadelphian and a Philly sports fan who get a chance to cover the teams and the Eagles particularly, everybody says, okay, if it's not the local guy, get the guy's son. So no matter how good or how bad he might be, it's always get the guy who's familiar. And he's about a top 5 linebacker and everything. I don't know if it makes sense. And it also all depends on when they decide to get a linebacker, and I know they do. It's tough to force the Eagles to get one. I know they have Nakobe Dean, who they got at the end of the first round a couple of years ago. He hasn't panned out yet. We don't even know because he hasn't been healthy enough for him to pan out. I thought it was a decent pick, by the way. I know we can probably get to that later, but I like the Michigan kid. Well, they actually got a couple Michigan guys, but I really do like Colson. And I think, Big Ten linebackers, whether it's from Michigan, whether it's Ohio State, I think they have a good reputation as far as making an impact in the NFL, and they bring a lot of toughness. So Colson's a guy that's probably on my radar. Let's say if they don't, go after Jeremiah Trotter, and it'll be interesting to see, what the Eagles do when they pick a linebacker. Is it going to be second, third round, middle round? You don't know when these guys are, how these guys are going to, be as far as the draft is concerned. And, you have to look at the needs of other teams too. It seems like every other team in the league is eager to pick a linebacker or not afraid to pick a linebacker in the first couple of rounds. But, the Eagles have done that, but we just have to see the results as far as Nakobe Dean is concerned.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's one thing that kind of matters first and foremost is Philadelphia's feelings on Nakobe Dean and, how far away is he from actually contributing. And we're talking about which one of these linebackers in the draft can contribute. And, we got to think about the guys, who are here. Obviously, they signed Devin White. Harry Roseman's speaking to the media earlier today, and that was one of the things that he was saying is just how the basis of the strategy in general, not talking about linebackers, but was to really just attack the needs in free agency. That way you can just look to kind of go best available in the draft as a basis for their formula. And so when you look at, and OJ, you said when, and I hope it's when. Until I see it, it's if they draft a linebacker.
Yeah, when as opposed to if, right?
I hope it's when, but I feel like it might be if. I will be interested to see who it is. I mean, listen, my guy's Edgerrin Cooper. It's been that way since day one.
Cooper's good.
I think Junior Colson's done. I think he did a lot of good at Michigan, and I think Philadelphia really does believe in that kind of pedigree aspect that you mentioned. We saw that with Georgia, obviously, and they started targeting Alabama guys in recent years. So I think that there's definitely something to that. And people do love his ability in coverage, which is something that'd be major in the Vic Fangio system. But with a guy like Edgerrin Cooper, you're getting a guy who can do it all and has that mean streak to him as well. So. If they're able to land,
we haven't seen that in a while. A guy that
we have not seen that. Yeah, exactly.
Wait. What about Nate Gary? Are we going to talk badly about Nate Gary? Is that what we're doing right now?
Oh my gosh! Don't get me started. Don't get me started. And just to your point, Brian. They have to hit. Of course, we have Dean here. They have to hit, and you mentioned White also, Zach. I would have loved for them to give White, since he's still young, I would have loved a multi-year deal, because I'm just so sick of the plug and play linebacking core. Like, you just can't run guys in and out of here and expect some continuity on a defense. I mean, I know you have a new defensive coordinator and everything, but you have two guys who you are projecting to be studs up front. And if you're going to have Carter, and if you're going to have Jordan Davis here for a number of years, you need to have some stability behind them as well. So, is that going to be Dean? And if White plays well, Zach, he's probably going to get more money somewhere else. They're not going to pay him.
Probably more than in Philly.
So we're going to be back in the same situation next year. So that's kind of what I worry about with the linebacker position. And really the only thing that I've been overly critical about with Howie Roseman and the Eagles front office over the past few years.
See, and
you mentioned Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. Brian, it's my turn. Thank you. You mentioned Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis.
I'm pretty sure there's a mute button around here. I think I can find it.
And just an interesting thing with that is that, you have two young guys who, specifically in Carter's case, franchise cornerstone projected guys. The hope is that it's there for Jordan Davis as well.
Right.
I know a lot of people don't like to think this way, but this is just the kind of honesty of team sports, is that you want to put these guys in a position to succeed, and that involves also putting talent behind these guys as well.
Absolutely.
Right? So
Absolutely.
we think about the troubles the Eagles had stopping the run last year, and everybody really started looking at Jordan Davis during that too. Well, if we sure up the linebacker play a little bit, get some sure tacklers behind these guys, I think that will help some. Having pass rushers who I'm just going to say it, who aren't sack chasing might also help. But there's just a lot of things that kind of go into the equation.
Shots fired.
Listen, man. Hey, he got us to a Super Bowl. He took Purdy out the game, and it was pretty.
And I'm very grateful, and I hope he gets his bag for sure, because not enough players make enough money for what they put their bodies through.
Guys, if I ever own a bar or something like that, I'm going to call it Sack Chasers. It was going to be best of 5, but I'm going to call it Sack Chasers.
Oh, that's great. That's the signature drink too. Absolutely.
You got to have the thumb down like this all the time as a logo.
Yes, sir. Yes,
but speaking of
right in front of the
bag,
door, yes.
Just to piggyback off of OJ saying, like, my thinking with Devin White is he's only 26 years old, if I'm not mistaken. If he does have a decent enough season, I feel like he could be kind of the new version of Alshon Jeffrey, where they extend him towards the end of the season to keep him around on decent enough money. Do you think he'll ask for a ton of money after having a successful season in Philly, or is it kind of one of those things where, like, hey, it fits, I don't want to go nowhere else kind of thing? Because it seemed he like hell bent getting out of Tampa Bay.
Well, if you're White's agent, if you get to November and December, you already know what kind of season you're having, right? So if you're White and his agent, why would you even sign that and you can just get on the market, and you can get your next 4-year deal, and you can get a big signing bonus on the market. So, I mean, and that's also not ideal with what the Eagles do also, but I would have liked a multi-year deal to just see, because he's only 26 years old, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think somebody had chimed in on the chat board, and they just said, Kobe Dean needs help. He might be solid, but he needs help. And it's going back to Dean for a second. Even though I didn't look at him, and a few times that we've seen him play, I didn't look at him necessarily as a playmaker. But I think in the beginning of the season last year, although they weren't making a whole, lot of plays, I thought they were solid just with him making the calls. And that's stability right there. If you can have a middle linebacker who can just make all the right calls, you don't necessarily be a playmaker, but make all the right calls and make sure all the other guys in position, that's a plus as well. So I don't think we can downplay that as you need a good quarterback and a good signal call on the defense as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you need someone who's effectively going to run the defense in that case. And, Devin White will have his opportunity. That's not necessarily been his game so far. Kind of to OG's point, as far as him signing in the middle of the season an extension with Philadelphia, I think part of the difference between that and, when you look at Alshon Jeffrey, is that it's part of it's positional. With a guy who's a bit more of a skill guy, he's not necessarily living and dying by the next paycheck. A linebacker, a running back, they're a little bit more desperate for that money, just because that drop off can come who knows when. It's just so much more physically demanding. But with the wide receiver,
factor, right?
Exactly. With a wide receiver, you have good QB marriage, competitive franchise you're playing for. They want to pay you a lot of money. That's all three boxes you need. And it's just, that money box is just a little bit bigger for some of those other positions out there. But, I do think this is an area they have to adjust to the draft. OJ, you mentioned earlier, kind of just wanting that continuity, trying to build. And I think that's absolutely true, which is why I think you have to commit to drafting with the amount of picks the Eagles have this year. I would hope that they draft 2. I would take a guy in the first maybe 4 picks that they have, and then I would take another guy towards the end of their draft this year, just to kind of build that continuity. And even guys that we've seen in years past, some of those special team specialists that we've seen over the years in Philadelphia, they haven't even been looking at those guys in recent years. And even just to have a player like that and that kind of consistent stretch for 3-4 years with the franchise, I think would go a long way. So I think continuity is a huge deal.
So you guys mentioned a lot of the top guys. I feel like there's one player that wasn't mentioned. I'm curious as to why. So Peyton Wilson from NC State. I mean, I know age-wise and injury history is a little bit of concern, but he seems like the total package at linebacker, where you bring him in, plug him next to Kobe Dean, plug him in the same group as a Devin White, and you're going to see this guy flourish in Philly if he can stay healthy. Big concern is if you bring him in, then you have 2 linebackers that have significant injury history in both Nakobe Dean and Peyton Wilson. Is this a guy that Philly should overlook, or is this a guy that Philly should at least consider enough, come the second round for one of those picks, make the move for Wilson if Edgerrin Cooper's not there?
Yeah. Wilson is top rated on different lists depending on which ones you depend on. And I'm old enough to remember magazines and everything. I don't even know if they still have streets.
Those were the good old days, OJ.
All those, right? So
those were good times.
I should save my money to get $10 to get those things, but I digress. But Wilson's at a top of a lot of people's list, and like you said, there is the injury history there, and that might be something that the Eagles might be reluctant to do, because they're already going through it. And as Zach said earlier, linebacker in of itself is a physically demanding position. So you kind of want to get a guy, no matter where they go, they kind of want to get a guy who is just ready to go, and you don't have to worry about that history. You don't have to worry about getting another guy like that again. And Wilson may be great for another team, or another team that's desperately needs to say, okay, this is our need here. Wilson's our guy. He can be our stud, for the next 4 or 5 years. But, the Eagles, I think, have to be a little careful as far as who they pick. But, if they were to, if Wilson wasn't falling to their lap, I wouldn't be upset either.
No, I wouldn't be upset at it at all. I just don't think they'll have the opportunity, frankly. I know that there's been a bit of discourse just kind of around him falling in the draft, and I think that's a little bit overblown. I think that you have some teams that are working to make sure that he's available when they select. And, really the big spot I'm looking at is Carolina at 39. There's been a lot of people drawing those comparisons between him and Luke Kuechly. I think that when you look at the ceiling,
too.
it is. It's real high praise, and it makes sense. Unfortunately, it makes sense in every area, including the injuries. But when you look at the ceiling, he's looking like Luke Kuechly.
So,
yeah, exactly. And when you're looking at the floor, you're looking at a Leighton Vander Esch. That's still a high level player. But you're looking at a guy who maybe his shelf life isn't the longest, and that's the concern that I do really have for Philadelphia. But I think there's still going to be plenty of interest, and especially Carolina, just because. Well, how do I put this kindly? I think that they're looking for a certain sense of relevance that bringing back a guy that you can market like the next Kuechly can bring. And he's a good enough player in his own right to deserve being drafted at 39 either. So you're not reaching for that guy. So I'm definitely not looking at him in the first round for Philadelphia. I don't think he'll be around at 50. I wouldn't mind it, especially since you're kind of in that win now mentality. And he's probably the closest linebacker to that win now ability. But it's just something that I just don't think is overly going to be realistic. There are some guys a little bit later on that I think can be long-term great fits, but just looking at where they draft, at 22, it's too high. At 50, 53, it's probably too low.
So we have the nostalgia pick and Jeremiah Trotter. We have the two favorites in Cooper and Wilson. Draft night, day 1 or day 2, when it all comes down to the wire, who's the guy that fits the mold the best in Philly? Is it going to be the kid that whose father was a legend in Philly, or do you guys feel like it's going to be somebody that's just not on anybody's radar that's going to contribute in a way that you feel like the Eagles are best fitted to see?
If I had to guess, I would keep an eye on Trotter just because I believe he may fall enough for him to go into the Eagles' lap, so to speak. And the Eagles have, I won't say they have so many needs, but I think they have a priority. And I always default like with the Eagles, and when in doubt, take offensive linemen. But a lot of people are saying that they may go corner and everything. I don't think so. Maybe second round or something like that, or unless they really love somebody that they can move up to. But I would keep an eye on Trotter, and also could be for a marketing standpoint as well, somebody that they can bring in and maybe bring along slowly, not ask a lot of him. And I think any linebacker that they pick up, they'll probably bring along slowly anyway because of what they already have in place.
Yeah, I would say for the most part, I wouldn't expect any of these guys to start. Maybe Cooper, if he just out earns it from Dean. I wouldn't expect any of these guys to start right away. But Jeremiah Trotter Jr., I love the idea of a legacy pick. Watching his tape, the best thing that I can kind of say is that he'd be available at 120. At least that's my expectation. So in the 4th round, I'd say that he would provide good value if he's there around that range. He's not really a guy I'm looking at in the 2nd round. Not really a guy I'm looking to trade up to get from 120. But if he does fall, there's a little bit of concern just because obviously he's a little bit undersized, and there's a little bit of decision-making gaps here and there that you see, but I do love the general athleticism that he does provide to the position. It's something that Philadelphia really doesn't have. And Brian, you talked about kind of the most I forget your exact phrasing, but like the most Philadelphia pick, the most Eagles pick here, and kind of struggling to think about what you mean by that because they've ignored this position for so long. When we think historically, the guy who comes to mind is Tyrese Knight at a UTEP, who is just an absolute demon on the field, and somebody I think could really bring that grit, that determination, And then if you think about a guy who, can kind of provide what the team needs a little bit, I'm not opposed to a guy like Trevin Wallace out of Kentucky. Liam Jenkins actually went over some of his film and uncovered a good bit of his coverage instincts as well. So he's a guy who a little bit later in the draft you could be looking at and showcase some of those skills that Philadelphia needs. But again, I just come back to Edgerrin Cooper, because when we come back to, ironically, the guy here who's probably the most like Jeremiah Trotter is not Jeremiah Trotter Jr., it's Edgerrin Cooper. So, when you talk about who that best fit is, for me, it's still Cooper.
I don't want you to sell me on it too much to the point where I start falling in love with it and then it doesn't happen, and I'm texting OJ like, I'm depressed right now. They didn't make any pick for any linebacker at all. They just picked offensive linemen throughout the whole draft.
It's possible.
It's very possible.
It's quite possible. But one thing that Zach mentioned with a couple of these linebackers, how he loves value in those middle rounds, third, fourth, fifth round, he loves value. So that is one thing to keep an eye on. So, and he loves the deal. I mean, people, we're always focused on how we moving up in the first round. But he loves the deal in the middle rounds too. So, and he really prides himself on getting value in those middle rounds. So I think it will be interesting. I'm not set on them, like you said, Brian, possibly they may not take a linebacker at all, but if he does some wheeling and dealing, it is something for us to watch.
Nice. So I know we have you for a couple more minutes, OJ, so I want to kind of pick your brain about this one. In the last two drafts, the Eagles have made significant trades. They traded for DeAndre Swift. I want to say the year before is when they traded for AJ Brown, and they gave him the 4-year extension.
Right.
This is year 3 of them thinking that they're in win now mode. I have a name in mind that I feel like the Eagles should trade for. Is there a player that you feel like Eagles fans should actually keep an eye on to see if how he swoops in and steals them from another team?
Well, I didn't think of it in that aspect, Brian. And before Hassan Reddick was traded to the Jets, I was all set on, okay, this is going to be the draft day trade. But that wasn't the case. My guess is if they don't get the player that they want, and I've never seen them trade for, let's say, an offensive lineman. They just don't do those things. But if they don't get the player that they want in the first round, I could foresee a trade here and there. But I just don't really see it this time around. I don't think third time's going to be the charm. Just the way that the draft board looks, the way their roster looks. I just don't anticipate it. You never know with Howie, of course, because he would trade his grandmother if he knew he could get value for him, but value for her. But I don't anticipate a big trade this time around.
I wouldn't expect it during the draft, but what I am interested in is the possibility of trading down at some point in this draft, picking up future picks, and then possibly using those picks around the trade deadline or at some point closer to the trade deadline, thinking about obviously a guy out there in Denver who Philadelphia would love to get their hands on, so acquiring maybe another second round pick by trading down in the first round or something in a similar situation such as that. So we'll see. I don't know how interested Denver would be in pick 22 when their rebuild is going to be. It's going to be a long time. So I think they're looking for a bit more future picks. And who knows? Maybe that Hassan Reddick pick was so far out for a very similar reason. We'll never know.
Sounds like you read somebody's article about trading for Patrick Surtain. That was the exact offer I put on there. But I'm going to take that as admiration, and I appreciate
somebody
it.
Write about that?
Wow. Okay, we're going off. Okay, walking the plank now. I see. But yeah, I feel like Patrick Surtain, or I know the cornerback position is a logjam. I know the James Bradbury contract makes everything in the world difficult, even though he's a bald man like us, and we appreciate his services so far.
Well, Brian, that could be as crazy as Bradbury's contract is. That might be a draft day trade.
Mm-hmm.
If the right team or the right moves happen, day 1, day 2, if the right team comes along to try to pick up Bradbury's contract, It's a shame that it's not like baseball where, okay, yeah, we'll pay it, we'll still
Yeah.
pay salary, and yeah, you have to worry about a salary cap, except maybe just a soft luxury cap, but in a perfect world. But that's something that you might be able to see, and I know Eagles fans will be super happy to see that happen as well.
It would definitely cause its own parade in Philadelphia, for lack of a better term. But I don't know, like I feel like a player like Patrick Surtain, I feel like a player name escapes you at the very moment. Carolina Panthers cornerback,
Oh,
the young
JC
kid,
Horn.
JC Horn. I know during that draft they
Yeah,
were
his name
high
has
on
been
both of
floated
them.
around too, right?
Yeah, I feel like one of those players makes a lot of sense for Philly, to line up with Darius Slay and Keely Ringo, and just start preparing for the future. I mean, you gotta get younger where you can, but you have to get efficient where you can as well. I feel like defensively, because it looks like offensively that's where all the money's going. I mean, they signed Saquon Barkley, they signed Landon Dickinson, they extended Devontae Smith as well. Defensively, you're not seeing the big contracts go that way. So if you're gonna go young, at least go young and efficient. I feel like those two players could really lead them down the right path.
Yeah, I'm still a bit interested. Oh, I'm sorry, Zach, but I want to take your turd either. But
Oh no, you're fine. I'm adjusting, man. No, you're good.
okay, all right, thank you.
I'm thinking about Flyers
I'm
hockey.
still
I'm
a guest,
wondering what the
so-
score is right now. You're fine.
But no, gosh, I lost my train. Oh, I'm just interested to see, when Isaiah Rodgers, and has he officially been off suspension? I guess, but I'm
Nah, yeah,
interested to
apparently.
see how he's going to fit in here. I mean, do they foresee him as a possible replacement for Slay or for Bradbury, or do they look at him as a hybrid? That's kind of what I'm most interested in the quarterback position this year, because again, they have another young guy that they're bringing in here, and it'll just be interesting to see what his fit will be.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I'm really excited to see what they do with Isaiah Rodgers. I think he is a guy that you can kind of move around a little bit.
Hmm.
Obviously, for as much as we talk about cornerback being in need, the room is kind of stacked. It's just not stacked with
It is.
the highest level of talent. There's a lot of good young guys who are going to contribute over the years. Darius Slay is obviously still Darius Slay, and James Bradbury. I mean, if it's not at the draft, I would think once the first major injury comes across, I think Bradbury is probably going to be on the move. But there's a lot of potential there. And one thing that we haven't really talked about, Avonte Maddox is back. So the thought initially was like, okay, so probably the new slot. That's what we're probably talking about, moving Isaiah Rodgers. But now you have the ability to put him in nickel showings. You can honestly play a lot more dime with him too, is going to be one interesting thing between having Maddox, between having some of these safeties. And if you're going to be working some zone schemes, you can get a lot of really interesting ball hawks out there kind of at one time. So a lot of real athletic play at the corner, and general defensive back position. So it's going to be really interesting. I also don't really feel like that trade is going to necessarily come as it did for AJ Brown. But man, would I not be mad at it? I'll tell you that right now. If we had
I
another
would
surprise
I would
like
be
that.
ecstatic if they trade for
For
one of those
sure.
guys. It just feels like they
Bring
checked
me
in at the
Marshawn Lattimore,
deadline.
absolutely.
Who I feel like is a very nobody's speaking about the fact that Saints they want to move off of Marshawn Lattimore. Like that's a huge move if you make it. But one way or another, if I feel like if you're gonna win now, you gotta just do what you can. I mean that Super Bowl window's not gonna be open forever, and I feel like the Niners are closing theirs very shortly. OJ, I greatly appreciate you coming on, man. We met in training camp, and I appreciate your kindness that day. I'm happy we're finally able to get you on. For the rarity of people that don't know who you are, because we know you're an award-winning journalist, we know you're the guy. Can you just tell them where they can find your work and where they can follow you on?
Sure. So I do sports stories for the Philadelphia Tribune, the longest continuously published African American newspaper in the country. So you can check out my articles at phillytrib.com. And as I interact with you guys every now and then, I always post it on Twitter or X. I'm at OJ Philly. Also on Threads at OJ Philly as well. So I post all my work up there. So you can catch me there, follow me there. And it's been my pleasure, guys. And thank you so much for having me on.
Anytime. We'll definitely make sure we can get you on after the draft when we can celebrate the Sir Change raid.
That sounds good to me.
For sure.
All right, guys.
Take care.
We'll talk, OJ. Have a good one.
All right, now.
All right, guys. So that was
love
OJ
a good glass
Spivey
of
joining
OJ.
us. What happened?
I said I love a good glass of OJ. Love that guy. Great guy.
Yeah, big shout out to OJ for joining us tonight. Now we're gonna kind of lead into wide receiver. I feel like Zach and I's one of our favorite positions, I could say. But the Eagles are in a unique position of his own. They have Paris Campbell that they signed. They had Devontae Parker. None of them are who they once were per se. Campbell and Parker. Well, Parker's age. Campbell's, has a little bit of an injury history, but that third wide receiver slot is still wide open. We've never seen Brandon Covey use an offense. Could the Eagles target somebody on day 2 to fit that role? And I mean, who do you feel fits that role perfectly? Because I feel like they could go deep in the draft and get a guy like, I think we'll both agree on, like Luka McCaffrey.
Well, before we get into wide receivers and move fully off of linebackers, I just want to address Davey's question here. So,
Where we at?
JD Bertrand, Notre Dame. I talked earlier about those kind of guys that can contribute to special teams for years to come, and occasionally, to the actual defensive unit as well. And I think he's a guy who could kind of fall in line there. I'm not sure that he ever becomes a starter at the NFL level, but he is a guy who I think could make a probably about 8 to 10 year career in the NFL for himself. And you need guys like that. So good head on his shoulders, good leadership skills, hustles plenty. The physical ability is not where I would necessarily want it to be, but definitely a guy that I wouldn't hate, with one of those later picks, maybe around 210 or even 172, something like that. But definitely not opposed to him later in the draft. But as far as wide receiver goes,
wait, time out. Davey said I could replace Bradbury. Is that because I'm bald?
I mean,
I can't play cornerback. It's gonna be much worse than what you're seeing on the field.
The prerequisite to be James Bradbury, just to be bald? Is that not?
He doesn't have a beard. I mean, he has a beard, but it's like a line. Not a beard.
I try not to look at him. It's too painful. It's just because he's usually getting burnt. But if we're talking about a wide receiver, if we're talking James Baldberry, Ron said nice. If we're talking about wide receivers, there's been a lot of talk recently about drafting a wide receiver in round 1.
No.
Specifically Brian Thomas. And let me just get this out of the way. Brian Thomas is a fantastic wide receiver. A team selecting at or about 22 would love what they get in Brian Thomas. You do not need another first-round wide receiver. There are only so many balls on the field at one time. You just can't. You're not going to be able to get it to him between Saquon, between AJ, between Devontae, between Dallas. Jalen keeps it plenty. That's something that's already been speculated about. Is how people feel about Jalen taking all those touchdowns himself, which I think is overblown and ridiculous. But that is something that has come up, right? So to bring in another receiver into that mix, or at least a guy who has such a high draft pedigree and is trying to go out there and be a number 1 for a team. No, I don't see it happening. A lot of guys later on in the draft that I don't mind one bit. First and foremost, the guy who I'm hitching my wagon to immediately, Malachi Corley, the rat god. I want no one more than Malachi Corley in this draft.
That's a second round pick. That's definitely he's not falling deeper than that.
I think you could trade down from 53, but yeah, you're probably talking about in those comp picks in the second round.
Okay. That's a pretty good pick. I've seen mock drafts where they have and forgive me for pronouncing this wrong, Adonai Mitchell drafted to the Eagles. Adonai. Which I feel like is another great move. And there's another kid that I'm terrible with freaking names, man. The kid from Oregon. Troy Franklin.
Yeah.
A little bit of a burner. Not polished, completely yet, but I feel like that would be a good fit wide receiver 3. My take is Luke McCaffrey later in the draft because it's not about the name, it's about the game. The kid has hands for days.
How long have you been planning to say that? When did you Were you? Is this draft day and you wrote that on a sticky note, spinning your pocket for like 3 weeks to say
I
that phrase?
actually wrote it in my article when I selected him in my mock draft, and actually the same exact phrase. But that's my thing. Like people think about McCaffrey, you're thinking about Christian, right? Like you think about it's his brother. No, like this kid can pave a way of his own because that's how good he is with when the ball's in the air. You've seen him snatch the ball out of the hands of cornerbacks. You've seen him make these ridiculous catches, one-handed catches behind the cornerback's back. He's not a deep threat, but I feel like he would be such a good slot receiver in between AJ and Devontae. He could spell them as well, keep them healthy. Like it just screams like a Philly move if the 49ers don't do the stupidity of picking him just because that's his brother. It feels like a Philly move to me.
Oh, they also need a wide receiver.
They need a lot of things.
To be on the move.
Yeah, for 49ers, go ahead.
Luke McCaffrey, I am a big fan of. I'm not going to lie. And I think a lot of it comes down to secure hands. He has that like avantness in that sense. If he can work on his footwork a good bit, I think that's the primary focus that I want him looking at. With his natural agility, you're looking at a really shifty guy in the slot. You're looking at somebody who can actually really thrive and really outperform his expected draft range. So
a better version of
there's a lot of work that needs to be done. What's that?
A better version of Julian Edelman. I feel like he's a lot more twitchier than Edelman.
Well, yeah, I mean, you won't have Tom Brady throwing at him. Like I love Jalen Hurts, but you have to acknowledge that. I feel like, but from like a skill perspective, yeah, no, I agree. And he's got good size. I'm not really worried about him getting beat up too much in the slot. So, he's somebody who I think people are going to fall in love with him a little bit more come closer to the draft. He'll probably closer to that 120 spot than that 161. Looking at 2 draft picks that the Eagles have. But yeah, no, he's definitely somebody that I have my radar on. And if we're talking about that kind of range, another guy that I want to mention is Arizona's Jacob Cowing. I think that he deserves a fair amount of mention. Just somebody who can really just become that kind of expert in the slot. And the name of the game for him is separation. So really kind of give you that. Not quite the rack ability of Malachi Corley, not quite the surety of hands of a Luke McCaffrey, but somebody who can really just kind of separate and get a nice big window for Jalen Hurts to help him out and find his not a check down guy, but a safety valve, if you will.
And that's a good way of looking at it because I feel like the Eagles are in a very unique position right now. AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, they could play in and out, which is phenomenal. But they also can play a great, very lethal deep threats. And it's not about speed with these two. It's the footwork, it's the routes, it's just the way they get separation is phenomenal, I feel like. So the Eagles are in a comfortable position where they can get a guy who can just be that safety valve for, hey, we missed Dallas Goedert last season because we couldn't have nobody in the middle. You get a slot wide receiver, then you're not missing that much of a dynamic receiver on the field. You have somebody that can take that position. You're going, with a three wide receiver set majority of the time. Again, just being that check down guy, being that guy that could be in the middle of the field, that can be reliable in the middle of the field. Because I feel like wide receiver 3 is something you also talk about is that position hasn't had any great reliability ever since AJ Brown came to town, just because it feels like Quez kind of just lost his confidence and just forgot how to play ball. But yeah, I completely agree with you. Finding that safety valve, finding that guy that could be in the middle of the field and just be a check down guy for Jalen is very key. As ironic as it sounds, like that's a very, very big necessity for this offense.
The other thing that I wouldn't hate is, getting a guy who can consistently be a big threat on the outside, and that way you can work AJ and Devontae inside a lot more. So Tez Walker's the guy that I'm thinking of when I talk about that big outside guy, right? Somebody who he's drawn comparisons to DK Metcalf, and while I don't think he'll necessarily be that guy at the next level, somebody who can really kind of go up there at the point of attack and just snatch that ball out of the air. That's something that I think that there could be a lot of value of. Now, the only thing with that is that you're going to need a lot of ability out of Jalen Hurts to be able to place that in that position for him. But just with that catch radius that Walker has, it also covers up a lot of his sins at the same time. So, you're looking at a guy, I think, in Tez Walker who can potentially answer a lot of those questions for you. Then there's like a jack of all trades guy like Jalen Polk, who I've been a big fan of for a long time. Jalen Polk's been one of my top receivers for Philadelphia specifically, just because, again, he can kind of do a little bit of everything. And on top of that, he also has a little bit of explosive ability where he can kind of pull off a big play here and there. But this is deep. This is deep at the same time. Like, there's guys a little bit later on, so you have to be careful about like sizing, because some popular names like Malik Washington, you're looking at guys who are like 5'8" on a good day. Probably not looking at that for a wide receiver 3. Probably more of a special teamer, which is still important, but it's a shockingly deep draft for wide receiver.
I feel like for a lot of the positions, it's a very, very, very deep draft, except for what I personally feel like cornerback. I feel like cornerback, there's a huge drop off from the first round to the next. And that, many people like myself believe that's a position of need. It's just every other position, offensive line, you could go deep into the third, deep into the fourth. Linebacker, I feel like you go very deep in the draft. Wide receiver, tight end, even as well. The Eagles have their cream of the crop for any position in this draft. It's just you got to nail the first round, because the first round pick has to be able to make an impact not only this season but for seasons to come. And you're on a good streak right now. I mean, you've come so far from Jalen Reagor days and Andre Dillard.
Did you say that you felt like corner was heavy in the first round and kind of fell off from there? Is that right? Or
I feel like afterwards, after what's this kid's name? Rakenstraw. I feel like after that, it's a bit of a dip. I don't want to say like they're terrible.
I would push back in only in this sense. I think that there are actually some studs after that, but you're losing outside corners. You're looking at a lot of guys who'd be really good on the inside. So like I do agree after Rankstraw, you're kind of like losing it a little bit, but you're still looking at guys like Max Melton, who could be a stud. I think Bernardo Green could be really good for a team. Kalen Carson, we've heard a lot of good stuff about. The one guy I think could be a sleeper on the outside is DJ James at Auburn. So I think that there is not a lot of options on the outside when you get deep, and that's your argument, because Philadelphia doesn't need a slot corner. They just brought back Avonte Maddox. They have Isaiah Rodgers. What you need is an outside corner. So by that logic, yes, absolutely. That first round, maybe trading up in the second round, if you get a guy like a TJ Tampa, like that, and as far as that's concerned, you have to strike early there, because outside of that, I mean, you just don't really have the same options. And the one other exception that I'll give to that list is Kyrie Jackson out of Oregon, who, if it wasn't for the fact that he's 103, he would be a first-round corner in this draft, right? So he was a senior. I think he's going to be 23 or something like that. So he's up there in age, but the guy can play. So if you're a win-now team like Philadelphia, you're looking at a third-round corner there who can actually produce from day one. So, but you're right. Like, there is that kind of drop-off in terms of outside corner, which, I get it. Like, a whole lot of importance is now placed on the slot, but Philadelphia is already redundant at the slot position, slot corner position. So for them, figuring out that outside corner is the need. So hopefully they attack it early. We'll see what they do.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, so we covered linebacker and we covered wide receiver, and I Zach and I and Eric and Morgan were speaking about possibly doing a live mock draft as well towards the end of this week. Having everybody on to just do the mock drafts, make our picks from the first, second round, and then go from there with the draft coming up very, very soon. But yeah, definitely we appreciate you guys for tuning in. We appreciate everybody for following us, as well as the 205 people that are viewing us right now. Be sure to make sure you guys make your way to our YouTube channel and subscribe and like and comment as well on the video. Any last thoughts on linebacker and wide receiver? I mean, we know wide receiver is not crucial, but linebacker is still that position in Philly.
I mean, again, I I would love to see 2 linebackers out of this draft. I think it's 8 picks in this draft that Philadelphia has at this moment. I don't expect them to finish the draft using 8 of those selections. But even still, if there's a way to secure 2 linebackers in this, get a guy kind of early like an Edgerrin Cooper, and then get a guy kind of late like a Tyrese Knight or a Curtis Jacobs out of Penn State, is somebody he's a bit more of a pass rusher than he is a pass cover. But I think there's still some value there. Obviously, JD Bertrand we talked about, and
it sounds like Bertrand
Jordan McGee has been mentioned ad nauseum. What's that?
It sounds like Bertrand can end up being an undrafted free agent.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like 210, like maybe.
Yeah.
Just depending on how he tests, but he's somebody, and that's the thing. If you can if there's a solid name in the UDFA, that's totally fine with me too. I'll count that.
Absolutely. I mean, Reed Blankenship, Bryce Huff.
Well, they were talking to, I don't know if it was a Zoom meeting or what. I know that the Eagles did meet with Omar Speights out of LSU. And that's the kind of guy that I'm thinking, maybe later in that draft. And you talk about a guy who can rush the passer too. That's somebody who can do some work on special teams. That's somebody who can, really kind of help you out in that regard. Aaron Casey out of Indiana is another guy like that. So, there's some options. So it's just about taking advantage of that opportunity. But, I either need a guy high or I need 2 guys. That's from the linebacker position. That's my biggest takeaway.
Okay. My last thoughts is not going to be so much about the draft, but it's going to be that there's definitely a big move coming one way or another. Howie did mention that they're going to continue adding, after the draft as well. And I feel like that screams the one player that we've all been vouching for, and that's Justin Simmons. Safety is still pretty thin. Sidney Brown is, he's coming back from the injuries. He's, ahead of schedule, which is great. But you still need, I feel like you still need that veteran back there. And just that guy to link up with CJ and Reed, and then just show the way to Sidney Brown. I feel like that could be a move, or cornerback could be a move, like Zach mentioned before, Marshawn Lattimore, Patrick Surtain, J.C. Horn. These are guys that could actually end up being moves to Philly, because Philly was once very interested in these players in the draft. So I feel like, there will be a big move made. Just don't know when. I don't know if it's going to be the draft. But like OJ said, if the guy's not that they want is not there at 22, then we could see another A.J. Brown kind of style trade. It's going to be, I feel like it's a very exciting draft this season, because, your team's in a very great position. Super Bowl windows wide open. They're in a winning position in NFC. They're definitely going to rebound this year. So it's a matter of just who's going to rebound with them in this draft.
Yeah, we'll see. I'll take a J.C. Horn move for sure. That's something that if I personally love Marshawn Lattimore, and I think everyone would love Patrick Surtain, but getting J.C. Horn would almost be like righting the wrong of not trading for Jeremy Chin. So that would definitely be a move of interest to me.
Very fair, very fair. But yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty long week already. It's only Tuesday.
And it's getting longer, dude. The second show, it's the Sixers play-in tournament tomorrow.
It's just growing longer by the day. But yeah, I'm Brian Cameron alongside Zach Chavalella. Again, shout out to Morgan, shout out to Eric, shout out to OJ for joining us. We really appreciate you. We'll see you guys at some point again this week for a live mock draft. And then until then,
go Birds.
Yes, sir.
Flippin' the bird.